You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere else but right here at Locked On. I am your host, Tenitra, Batiste, and alongside me is Deshaun, Tate. This Locked On Hawks Postcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, Deshaun, the Hawks fell 116-110 to the Hornets in their 2023-24 season opener. A little disappointing, but also encouraging in some of the things that we saw tonight. So let's talk about it in T's and Tate's take. Now, here's the first thing that I want to talk about, but I want to kind of throw it to you and get your thoughts, right? So much emphasis has been placed on the Hawks improving from beyond the arc. We've heard it all offseason. We heard it throughout training camp. And yet here we are. In game one of the season, 5 for 29 is what the Hawks shot from deep. Was that the improvement that you wanted to see over where you saw them last year?
Absolutely not. I feel like I got the egg on my face right now, Tenitra. People have been asking me all week, all offseason, if we're going to see, the Hawks kind of pick up where they last left off. Are they going to be able to improve from three? We've heard multiple times, even dating all the way back to later on in the season on last year, where head coach Quinn Snyder was just kind of talking about, we want to become more of a high volume, high 3-point perimeter shooting team. And in order to do that, I would imagine that you want more, 3-point makes than just 3-point attempts, right?
Yes.
But that wasn't the case on today. I think we got to a point where it was either in the half or coming out of the half, and they were 9% from three. That's just something that can't happen. On the night they shot 17%, not 70, 17% from three, and that's just something that you can only imagine is not going to add a number to the left side of the result column, in which tonight it didn't.
Yeah, and when you look at the box score, not one player was on the positive side as far as 3-point attempts and 3-point makes. So you're talking about 1 of 4. Multiple players, 1 of 9 from Trae Young. And we'll talk a little bit about Trae more in the and 1, but 1 of 9 from Trae from beyond the arc, 0 for 3 from Dejounte. And then you have multiple players on this roster who either didn't hit a 3-point shot, period, or just hit one of their 3-point shots for the night. So you did have a few. Actually, no, I take that back. Nobody shot more than and made more than one 3-pointer tonight. So yeah, that was a little bit of a head scratcher because there was so much emphasis on it during the offseason and during training camp. Now, for me, one of the takeaways from tonight's game also, Deshaun, was the other focus during training camp, and something we heard all off season long, the commitment to defense. And that's what we're going to be about. And even Trae Young, after the last preseason game, talked about the fact that he felt like the offense was coming together, coming along, trending up, but it was really the defense that they were focused on. Now, say that as we will, the defense was on display tonight, but maybe like we talked about pre-show, more so in the commitment versus the execution. And we say that because, yes, give the Hawks a world of credit for being able to get 12 steals off the Charlotte Hornets and getting the Hornets to turn the ball over 19 times. But we got to dig a little bit deeper into that number and understand that some of those turnovers were kind of self-inflicted wounds from Charlotte. Mm-hmm. So that's where it kind of is a little bit quirky. But ultimately speaking, I still say I like the fact that the Hawks attempted to commit even down to something that I know you and I cringe at, right? When we look at a box score and whenever we see personal fouls at a 6 clip where DeAndre Hunter fouls out, you look at that, and then you also look at Onyeka Okongwu just a step away from fouling out with 5 fouls. And that's always our thing with Double O. We love the aggression, but it always needs to be contained because we don't want him to then get in foul trouble and then have to pull back from being aggressive. So what were your thoughts on the commitment that you saw tonight? Not necessarily the execution, but commitment on defense.
Well, that's the thing, is that you have to be there. You have to be in place to be able to gather the ball when the team is having some of those miscues and unforced errors and turnovers and things of that nature. If you're not in place, if you're still jogging back down court and still trying to set up your defense, and that's giving an opportunity for the opposition to get out into transition, have easier baskets. But if you're in place, and I'm not talking about running out at players to try and close out on jump shots at the last minute. When you're there standing in place right there in front of them and closing out and preventing them getting on, transition and fast break point opportunities, then you're doing something right. I think the other thing is, you kind of mentioned Onyeka Okongwu, where I'm going to play a little bit with the abbreviation brothers a little bit. Two of them had really good games on tonight. Two of them didn't. Clint Capella, double C, and then double J in Jalen Johnson. The others, maybe not so much, where you have double O in Okongwu and then double B in Bogey Bogdanovic. But that just kind of goes to show if they're finding a way to kind of get a little bit more on a balance, a playing field amongst one another. Of course, it's just game one. I want to always be the person that's going to remind the people, don't be the person that's just, granted, no, it's not summer league. It does actually count. It's not preseason. It does actually count. But this isn't the time to push the panic button and go so crazy. It is just game one. But we would much rather, I think the consensus would agree, we would all much rather be on the positive side of the result column.
Exactly. And one of those areas that could make it a little bit more positive, and we'll look to see that Friday night, and we'll talk a little bit about that in rapid fire, but that is maybe being where you have the active hands that get you the 12 steals, maybe just having active but controlled hands around the rim so that you minimize the opportunity for second chance points, you minimize the opportunity for points in the paint and allowing Charlotte to get comfortable in the paint, and you don't allow yourself to get out rebounded. Now, granted, I'll give him this much. Offensive rebounds, 12 and 12. So you pretty much held your own, especially in that second half, started to kind of tighten up in that area. But those defensive rebounds that were minimizing the Hawks' opportunities for second chance points is definitely something that they'll have to work on, sort of that rim protection, if you will. But we'll talk a little bit more in the deep dive in the and one about our thoughts on this season opener for the Hawks. But first, I want to tell you guys a little bit about PrizePicks. All right, so PrizePicks is one of those where everybody knows it. It's the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and pretty exciting way to play DFS, daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. So you can, maybe be like me. I'll call myself a novice, but you can test your skills on PrizePicks this football season. That's a cool way, exciting to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, maybe you can take that $10 that you would normally take to maybe a Starbucks, play it on PrizePicks. It'll actually turn into $250 versus just giving you a cup of coffee for the morning. PrizePicks is also really simple to play. Anytime something is user-friendly, I am all here for it. You can submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. So when I look at PrizePicks offers, the weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like you go up on Taco Tuesday, each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So I look at what I might possibly consider doing this week. And when I'm looking at the games that are pretty intriguing in the NFL going into week 8, I kind of think I'm going to go with Travis Kelce, because you know what? When Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes have an opportunity to do the darn thing and they're playing against the Broncos, I'm saying I'm going for that, especially with what we saw with Travis Kelce last week. And if I want to go another direction, I know we're not quite sure where Jalen Hurts is, but I think he might be healthier than we think. I think he'll run for a touchdown. And I also absolutely think that you're going to see another breakout game from AJ Brown. So don't forget to go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That is go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, Deshaun, let's go and go into a deep dive into the backcourt of the Hawks. We were thinking, hey, this is Trae Young, Dejounte Murray, Dejounte, whatever you want to call it. It's 2.0, where we hopefully get to see these guys reset and have the kind of backcourt experience, the kind of backcourt flow, dominance that we were expecting to see maybe last season. Well, Didn't quite see it in game one, at least from a points perspective, because they combined for 34 points, most of those points by Trae, by the way. But it was on 7 of 33 shooting from the field, 1 of 12 from 3. What do you make of the starting backcourt's performance against the Hornets tonight?
Yeah, definitely not leaving a good taste in my mouth, especially talking about shooting from 3. I don't know who needs to get it together. We got to figure this thing out real fast. I don't know if it's Dejounte. I don't know if it's Deshaun Trae. I don't care if it's Deshaun Tate. At the end of the day, we got to try and figure this thing out one way or another. That's just kind of what it comes down to. You know, when you start talking about the meat and potatoes of what, you know, is kind of supposed to be fearful for this team or for the opposing teams when it comes to this team, it is that magnificent backcourt. Yes. They are going to be the piece that will take this team as far as it will be able to go, whether that's game number 1, whether that's game number 82 or anything in between. And that's something that everybody knows. So they have to be better. I think they know that they have to be better. And I think that they also understand that they have to do more than just say, we have to be better. So, you know, I don't think that this is, again, a time to panic, much like game 1. I do think that I am okay with extending the leash of them developing still and establishing some of that chemistry that is stemming from last year. It's going to take time. I mean, they did it in half a year last year before they ended up switching coaches. Now you got the coach, and I know a lot of people are ready to say, well, this is year 2, and you ain't got it together, but it's still game 1. I don't think anybody has everything together as of yet. So I think it's still going to take some time, but I would much rather them have this thing figured out sooner than later, because that's going to probably be, I would imagine, the most significant piece to the success of this team going forward.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that we have to consider is sometimes it's just a matter of matchups, right? I mean, you look at the backcourt for the Hornets, and I mean, Lamelo Ball and Terry Rozier are something to have to deal with, right? They can be a problem. And when you look at their numbers, 39 points versus 33 points doesn't maybe seem like much of a difference, but Terry Rozier was 7 of 16 from the field. Still not bad. That's getting you close to 60%. LaMelo Ball shot 4 of 11. That's still roughly around 35, almost 40%. But still, when we're looking at 1 of 12 from the field, or from the perimeter rather, for the Hawks backcourt, that is a little bit troubling. So when you think about Terry Rozier and LaMelo Ball in the game that they had tonight, do you think that maybe Trae and Dejounte having a down night offensively was because they had so much trouble having to try to stop or slow down Ball and Rozier? Or do you think it was more that, hey, Ball and Rozier kind of figured out how to defend DJ and Trae?
Maybe a combination of both, but guess what? If you're having issues, with the Charlotte Hornets yet again in their backcourt of Terry Rozier and LaMelo Ball, and by all means, definitely, give them credit and respect their professional basketball players and everything else. But if you're having issues with them, what's going to happen when some of these more elite backcourt tandems, kind of figure out how to defend and shots are just falling, for them, it's going to be like throwing a rock into the ocean from the boat kind of thing. Shots are just going to be falling left and right. And it's also really not as if, Trae Young is the most amazing defender that we've ever seen, on God's green earth, kind of deal. So it's going to be a combination of multiple things. And sometimes somebody just said, listen, it's so much like boxing. When people say in the terms of, styles make fights. Sometimes somebody just has your number. I don't imagine that that's going to extend to be over a long period of time with this matchup between these two. I like to think they'll get it together relatively quickly. But that was the case on tonight. And whoever would have thought this, Tenitra, whoever would have thought that we would be talking about the front court for the Hawks without a John Collins and still trying to figure out, although being thin in the front court, that they would be more productive than the backcourt coming out to open up the season. It's crazy the way that it all works out sometimes.
Yes, and hold that thought. We're going to get to that in a second, but I think Mass has an interesting point. He says same old, third quarter woes and Terry Rozier. Coach got to go to the bench deeper, and pointers are kind of lacking. And it's interesting because you can kind of say same old, but hear me out on that one. You say that because Charlotte really does always give the Hawks fits. Like, this is kind of a surprising 116 to 110 because usually it's kind of crazy, but the Hornets usually when they win, they blow out the Hawks in the regular season. Now the Hawks have their number when it comes to the postseason or play-in, but in the regular season, it's the weirdest thing. And then, like you said, with three-pointers, sometimes it's just feast or famine. So if your primary three-point shooters in the ones who, to me, kind of stand out, obviously Bogdan Bogdanović, but Saddiq Bey definitely gives it to you as well. I mean, if Saddiq Bey only shoots 4 3-pointers and he only makes 1, and then Bogey shoots 9, but he only makes 3. Well, that's not so much trying to go to the bench to get 3-point shooting. That's that your sharpshooters just had an off night. And sometimes it does happen. But as far as going to the bench, actually, when I look at the bench and hey, perfect segue into what we're about to talk about, I think the coach was really good. I think that Quinn Snyder was good about going into the bench. If by bench, you're talking about Jalen Johnson, because guy had himself an absolute night. I mean, Jalen Johnson, literally, Hawks just exercised the fourth year contract option on Johnson, Sunday? And then he goes to have a career high in the season opener, 21 points, 9 of 13 shooting from the field to go with 7 rebounds, 2 steals, a block. My God, Deshaun, I feel like JJ is kind of paying off with this extension already.
Yeah, I definitely not sure I'm ready to go that far as of yet, but I will say that you have to start. There's a starting point somewhere, and I would much rather it be that way than for it to be what a lot of people would have expected from him in this game. I thought that this one should have been the biggest confidence boosting game for him. It's early. People still trying to figure things out. That is the time to come out and catch, lightning in a bottle and strike while the iron is hot. And talking about what his abilities are in terms of what just little things that he's been able to improve on, his activity. He's not always the most active guy all the time. I remember when the team had first drafted him. You think about these stretch fours and guys that just like to shoot from the outside and not be able to provide a whole lot more else since then. But since he's been on his team, you've seen him taking it to the cup a little bit more, trying to draw some fouls, contending guys at the rim. We know that he's not this, shot blocking, elite shot blocker, rim defender, whatever, what have you, but the activity, the effort, the things that we at least like to see out of a player like him, and just knowing that paying somebody this money is going, it appears to be for a good reason. If for no other time, then at least for this one game. And starting somewhere is where you got to start with this one game. And I am extremely impressed by what I've seen from him today, because from a confidence standpoint, I think he was really through the roof, and it was really kind of unrecognizable. And that is a great thing for Jalen Johnson.
Indeed. And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that this is the official beginning of the post-John Collins era. The reason I mentioned that is because everybody's wondering, what's going to happen, for the backcourt and kind of parts of the front court, if you will. But ultimately speaking, when we talk about the front court, the question was exactly what was going to happen at the 4. And kind of tonight, you saw an interesting kind of component there. I kind of looked at it as, I don't really know, because PJ Washington went off 25 points, 12 of 18 shooting from the field. And it was like, well, did that kind of platooning at power forward and on some level at small forward maybe not quite work, at least tonight?
Yeah, it felt like it was very much the Jalen Johnson and PJ Washington show for sure. And I can't recall the last time, and I'd be really interested to finding this out. Be more than happy for anybody to that's listening or watching to include or tweet us out at it. But the last time that I've seen the Charlotte Hornets not have one of those Plumlee brothers or not have one of those Zeller brothers on their roster. Like, it's been a long time. I sit there and I watch them draft, and, I'm trying to figure out, they got to start adding some more beef and some more athleticism, things like that. They were able to do that. We're going to get somebody like a PJ Washington. It takes some time, but he's starting to grow within himself a little bit, starting to gain a little bit more attention, notoriety from different people around the league, and just really filling out himself in terms of his game. So big game from him. Hopefully it won't be very many more, at least not against the Atlanta Hawks anyways. But I do really like the things that I've been able to see from him as of late as well.
All right. So in a minute, we're going to go rapid fire. But first, just wanted to remind you guys to be sure to like and subscribe to the Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube channel. I promise you, if you do, you won't be disappointed. Now, Deshaun will do a little rapid fire here because guess what? Although there's disappointment because you never want to lose your season opener, let's just face it. All of Hawks Nation, Hawks Country, Hawks Talking is looking ahead at Friday. The season opener at home, that is, against the New York Knicks, the nemesis, the thorn in the Hawks side, but the Hawks are a thorn in their side as well. That game is coming up on Friday, and there's just so much excitement there because that roster is a bit of a new look roster as well, because you look at the fact that, hey, they were one of those teams that tried to kind of retool. Now, granted, they took an L tonight as well. You know, Porzingis, speaking of three-pointers, he literally makes a tie-breaking three-pointers. The Celtics are able to get a win over the Knicks in his debut tonight. So they'll come in, the Knicks will, trying to get their first win of the season. But that said, Deshaun, what are you looking for two reasons? Number one, because it's your nemesis that you could get the first dub on. And number two, what you're looking for based on what you did or didn't see tonight that you want to see Friday.
Matching the energy. And that's not just from these players. You know, I do like to take these times out to kind of call out the fan base a little bit sometimes. We're not going to wait until we go on rolls and wait until we go on runs and late in the playoffs and start showing up. Let's show up. Let's show up early. Wear our red, because guess what? One thing that I will always respect about the New York fan base is that they roll for their team, but they're not the only ones. We do the same thing in Atlanta. Let's cheer on our team. Let's be loud. And invite them into our house. Bring your Timberland boots and everything else. Bring all of that, because Atlanta's going to be ready for that smoke for when New York comes in. So I want to see the energy being matched all across the board under those lights. And I really want to see what the bench can do. I think the bench production is going to be very key for this particular game. I don't think that I want to see some balance. I don't think everybody needs to have amazing nights, but I do think we need to have some games. And what other better time to start it than to be on Friday, where we say, you know what? This guy maybe didn't have the hottest hand, but he had a pretty good night, and he had a good night, and he had a pretty good night. I'm okay with so many guys having pretty good nights resulting in wins than just one hot guy having a great night and then either barely get a win or don't win at all. Let's just try and find some balance within, the bench, the scoring, and go out there and have some fun and show New York who's boss in this new fun rivalry.
And, I think that's such a great point that you make, because similar to Atlanta tonight, where you got it out of Jalen Johnson off the bench, but he's pretty much the only one you got it out of off the bench. You really want to see more out of your bench across the board. And we know really that starts with the guy who leads the charge for Bench Mob 2.0, who's Bogdan Bogdanovic. So, yeah, you definitely want to see Bogey do a bit more in that game. But you're right, because if you can match that energy on the bench, then you do yourself a solid, because where the Knicks did not have such a good night is from their bench. The only guy in double digits was Emmanuel Quickly. Now, he went off. He got 24, just like Jalen got 21. But ultimately speaking, if you can balance that out, get a little bit more from that bench, I think then that's like the energy that you want to see in order for the Hawks to get the win.
Yeah, and I want to see some of that grit. I want to see some of that grind. I know we're all about Southern hospitality and we're nice and all this stuff. And sometimes being from that region of the United States, it always, you hear about this New York state of mind and New York mentality, and they come with that. And guess what? That's their culture. That's what they play with. I want to be able to match that. I love the idea of what a player like a Sadiq Bey brings. I feel like sometimes they need to, kind of latch on to his energy sometimes, because he's no nonsense. Sometimes, it's kind of hard to read his body language sometimes, because he's not always the most emotional guy, but he goes out there and he gets the job done. And I know what I can expect from him each and every single night. So I also feel like that's one of those things that I think that the players also need to kind of go ahead and jump on that movement.
I like that, because that is one of those intangibles, right? We talk about the crowd energy and making sure that you show home court advantage that makes any team in the association afraid, and I do mean it the way I said it, afraid to come into State Farm Arena because the crowd is about to set it up and set it off for you. But I also think you make a great point about something I suspect you and I will be talking about this entire season, because you and I, having covered the Hawks for so many years, we've been talking about it for years, and that is, where's the grimy? Where's the grit? Who's that dog? And Saddiq Bey is a quiet dog, but he's a dog. He's got some of that in him. I still say Dejounte Murray is all the dog you need. He might look a little quiet and unassuming, but brother got a lot of edge. So this is one of those opportunities for the Hawks with a gritty, grimy team like the Knicks to be able to show we got a little edge too. And all of this, kind of, dare I say, finesse type ball that maybe teams have become accustomed to last season. I want to see some of that gone. So yeah, I want you and I hopefully to be able to have on Friday night's postcast a conversation about who was that grimy, who was that gritty, who got in the face of the Knicks to get a win. I love it.
You and me both. You and me both. Looking forward to it. Can't wait till we can do it.
Indeed. So we appreciate you all for stopping by the Locked On Hawks postcast. It's your home for the best Hawks talk throughout this entire season. So don't forget, there is some kind of matchup at State Farm Arena comes Friday. It's the Atlanta Hawks welcoming in, and I use welcome loosely, welcoming in the New York Knicks with a tip-off time of 7:30. So once you finish watching that, once that game is a wrap, don't forget, stop by the Locked On Hawks postcast, and Deshaun and I will see you on Friday.